as we have seen in the previous presentation that the digestive activity occurs in the large intestine, and the functions of the large intestine are absorption of water, minerals and certain drugs, secretions of mucus that helps in adhering to the waste or the undigested particles and lubricating it for the easy passage. The undigested, unabsorbed substances, which are called as feces, they enter into the cecum of the large intestine through the ileocecal valve, and which prevents the backflow of the fecal matter, and it is temporarily stored there. So these activities they are under neural and hormonal control for proper coordination, and the sight, smell or the presence of the food in the oral cavity can stimulate the secretion of saliva. Gastric and intestinal secretions are also stimulated by neural signals. So muscular activity of different parts of the alimentary canal, it also is moderated by neural mechanism, but local and through central nervous system. So hormonal control of the digestive juices is carried out by the hormones which are produced by the gastric and the intestinal mucosa. Now we start with the absorption of the digested food. एब्जॉर्प्शन प्रोसेस है जो कि जितने एंड प्रोडक्ट्स हैं डाइजेशन के व्हेन दे पास थ्रू द इंटेस्टाइनल म्यूकोसा इनटू द ब्लड और लिम्फ. सो इट इज़ डन बाय पैसिव, एक्टिव और फैसिलिटेटेड ट्रांसपोर्ट मैकेनिज्म. Small amounts of monosaccharides like glucose, amino acids and certain electrolytes, chloride ions, they are absorbed by simple diffusion. And these substances, they enter into the blood, which depends on the concentration gradients. Some substances like glucose and amino acids are absorbed with the help of carrier proteins, and this mechanism is called as facilitated transport. And transport of waste, it depends on the osmotic gradient. Active transport occurs against the concentration gradient and thus requires energy. And various nutrients like amino acids, monosaccharides, glucose, electrolytes, they are absorbed into the blood by these mechanisms. So fatty acids and glycerols, they are insoluble and cannot be absorbed by the blood. So they are first incorporated into the small droplets which are called as micelles, and which move into the intestinal mucosa. They are reformed into very small proteins which are called globules, and then into chylomicrons, and then they are transported to the lymph vessels, which is the lacteals in the villi. So these lymph vessels, they release the absorbed substances into the bloodstream. So absorption of substances takes place in different parts of the alimentary canal like mouth, stomach, small intestine and large intestine. But maximum absorption occurs in the small intestine. And here is the summary of all the absorptions that occur in the various parts of the alimentary canal. In mouth, we can see that certain drugs which comes in contact with the mucosa of the mouth in the lower side of the tongue, they are absorbed into the blood capillaries which are lining them. In the stomach, water, sugar, alcohols, these are absorbed. In the small intestine, various nutrients, they are absorbed, and here the digestion is completed, and the final digestion such as glucose, fructose, fatty acids, glycerol, amino acids, they are absorbed through the mucosa into the bloodstream. And in the large intestine, water, minerals and certain drugs, they are being absorbed. So the absorbed substances finally reach the tissues where they utilize them for other activities, and this process is called as assimilation. And the digested waste solidifies into feces in the rectum, and it is under the influence of neural reflex. It causes an urge or desire for its removal, and the ejection of feces of to the outside through the anal opening or defecation is a voluntary process, and it is carried out by peristaltic movements. Disorders of the digestive system. The inflammation of the intestinal tract is the most common ailment due to the bacterial or viral infections, and the infections, they are caused by parasites of the intestine like tapeworm, roundworm, threadworm, hookworm, pinworm, etc. Jaundice. In jaundice, liver is affected, skin and eyes, they turn yellow due to the deposition of the bile pigments. Vomiting. It is the ejection of the stomach contents through the mouth, and this reflex action is controlled by the vomit center in the medulla, and a feeling of nausea precedes the vomiting. Diarrhea. The abnormal frequency of the bowel movement and increased liquidity of the fecal discharge is known as diarrhea. It reduces the absorption of food. Constipation. In constipation, the feces are retained within the colon as the bowel movement occurs irregularly. Indigestion. In this condition, the food is not properly digested, leading to a feeling of fullness, and this causes the indigestion and inadequate enzyme secretion, anxiety, food poisoning, overeating of the spicy food. PEM, protein energy malnutrition. These deficiency of protein and total food calories, they are in the underdeveloped countries like South and Southeast Asia, South America, in the West and Central Africa. Protein energy malnutrition may affect large sections of the populations during drought, famine, political turmoil, and this happened in the Bangladesh during the liberation war and in Ethiopia also during the severe drought in the mid-centuries. So PM affects the infants and children to produce marasmus and kwashiorkor. Marasmus is produced by the deficiency of proteins and calories. It is found in infants less than a year of age. If the mother's milk is replaced early in the food, which is poor in proteins and calorific value, so this often happens if the mother has second pregnancy or childbirth where the older infant is too young. In marasmus, the protein deficiency, it affects the growth and replacement of the tissue proteins. Extreme body condition and thinning of the limbs, it results in the skin becomes dry, thin, wrinkled. Growth rate and body weight decline, and growth and development of the brain and mental facilities, they are also affected. In kwashiorkor, the protein deficiency is accompanied by calorie deficiency, and here the replacement of the mother's milk by a high calorie low protein diet of the child in more than a year age like marasmus. And kwashiorkor shows the wasting of muscles, thinning of the limbs, and failure of growth and brain development. And just like marasmus, some fat is still left under the skin, and extensive oedema and swelling of the body parts, they are seen.